Arts Festival, which is co-presented by Castle of Our Skins and HBCU Arts, supported by many, many other organizations and donors and sponsors, which can be found on the QR codes and program books throughout this beautiful space. My name is Dr. Ciyadh Wells, and I am the Executive Director of Castle of Our Skins, which is a Boston-based concert and education series that celebrates Black artistry through music, and I am today's moderator. So, I am going to ask everyone to briefly introduce yourselves, so who you are, your art form, and then tell us a little bit about your experience as an entrepreneur and an artist.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Stacey Allen. I am based in the Houston, Texas area. I am a arts educator and dance artist. I'm also the founder and artistic director of Nia's Daughters Movement Collective. We're a professional dance company, and the primary work that we create is about Southern Black stories, specifically freedom colonies throughout the South. I also adjunct at Stephen F. Austin State University, which is in East Texas, in the Piney Woods area. It's a state school, and I'm in the School of Theater and Dance. What was the other part you were supposed to say? My HBCU experience. I'm a Black person, but I didn't go to Okay. I don't have one.
Hi, I'm that works. Avid Williams. I'm a graduate of the Harlem Boys Choir, native of New York, Harlem native. I'm also president and artistic advisor of the CW Music Group. CW Music Group is the Clara Emma Williams Music Group, named in honor of my grandmother, where we present live performances and lectures throughout the country. Most recently, I've held a masterclass at Morehouse College, held masterclass at Texas Southern University. Again, African-American male. I'm also a full-time music teacher in the public school system, having taught throughout New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Central State University, I attended for about 2 semesters, Central State University, which is in historic Wilberforce, Ohio.
Hey everybody, I'm Kyle Exum. My art form is basically music and skits. I consider myself a writer though overall, because everything kind of branches out from there. So I've done a plethora of things between like skits on YouTube, music. I've written a children's book. I work now in like animation spaces too, so kind of a little bit of a mix of everything. And my HBCU experience, I was a Howard graduate from 2020 alumni. So yeah, class of 2020 at Howard University, and in the school of business for marketing.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Jolie Rocke, and I'm the founder of HBCU Arts. I am also an assistant professor of music at Prairie View A&M University and a former guest visiting artist at Texas Southern University. And so I founded HBCU Arts because I realized when I went to Texas Southern that students from HBCUs, faculty and alumni don't have the same kind of resources, access to resources and opportunities that are present at some of the traditionally white colleges and universities. And so I wanted to found an organization that could help bring access, increase access to our students and faculty and alumni. And so we showcase and promote the work of HBCU artists, and we also provide entrepreneurial skill development for HBCU artists, and that's why we have the Martha's Vineyard HBCU Arts Festival, which you are at right now. I think that's all I have to talk about. I'm also a professional singer and perform internationally.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Sarah Ruff. I'm the founder of the String Project, which is an initiative in North Alabama to provide underserved populations access to free string education. I'm also an assistant professor of music at Oakwood University. I've adjuncted at Alabama A&M as well. I didn't attend an HBCU, but my HBCU connection is the fact that I am employed by Oakwood University. I also, I play many instruments. I actually went to school for violin, music education, but for today's events, I will be a pianist.
And a really good one at that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
So, as you can see, we have a lot of wonderful people on this panel who have in some way started something, right? To be an entrepreneur, I think in the arts context means you start a nonprofit, you start some kind of business, arts-related business. And so I was wondering if anyone could share your motivation for starting something, right? You can always go find a collaborator, a partner to work with someone else, but why did you start it by yourself?
Oh, I can go. Okay. So for me, I started kind of building a business around like content creation, and really just because like I was passionate about creating. I think like a lot of artists are, like I just kind of wanted to like create something fresh and new that like was a way of me expressing myself, but also something that didn't really exist in the space that I was in. So there wasn't really anything to join that I knew about, especially at that time in 2016. Being a content creator was kind of new. It wasn't really like widely accepted. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, can you even do that like full time? Like, is that a thing?" And so yeah, I was motivated to find out, and really just the love for creating is what maybe drove me to do it.
One reason in which I created my organization is because I was a manager for a composer, H. Leslie Adams, the late famous Black American composer. And so was able to have conversations with New York City Opera that got part of his opera premiered in their showcase. And so from there, we went to the National Opera Association's National Convention, where I had conversations with persons. And so the next year, the convention was going to be in New York City. So I said, okay, if you come to New York City, why not I produce a program? When I said it, it was all in my heart. It was not in my bank account. It was not on paper. No, it was just in my heart. And so I said, okay, fine. So I ended up producing a chamber version of his opera at the Schomburg Library. And it was very interesting because, respectfully, the constituents of the National Opera Association, when anyone comes to New York, they go to Broadway, they go to the Met. They've never come above 96th Street. And so you had 2 busloads of people that perhaps didn't look like me, at the Schomburg Library. And oh my God, what is this purse? What is this place? And I said, well, Langston Hughes' ashes are here. And so all of these things, which obviously lended itself to not only people learning about culture in which they didn't aware of, also my client, Leslie Adams, got an opportunity for his opera to be premiered.
So my story kind of piggybacks off of this one because I started off as an independent choreographer, and I created a piece in 2018, and it did very well. And so then I had to build the infrastructure for a dance company as we continue to get more and more bookings. And so the very first piece that I kind of collected a group of dancers. It was called Dear Little Black Girl, and it followed this young girl on this journey. And then from there, I would apply for more residencies and more performance opportunities, and then it became important to build the infrastructure to accompany the work. And so that's kind of how I became an entrepreneur, or like I'll say, an arts administrator. And then from there, because I always accompany my artistic practice with my teaching, we did a lot of community engagement, a lot of arts education outreach. So then figuring out a structure that allowed for the performance company, but also like the arts education and the outreach. And that's how kind of we grew. And so even now, the company is about 8 years, has been in existence for about 8 years, but we decided to go with the fiscal sponsorship route because it allowed for us to be able to really hone in and focus on our work versus some of the administrative tasks, and has actually been a blessing. We were able to find a fiscal sponsor that is aligned, like-minded. We have full trust and procedures, and so we can use that to gain funding. And so I just always like to talk about fiscal sponsorship as an entry-level way for artists to create organizations.
Can you tell us more about what a fiscal sponsor is for the people in the room who might not be as familiar as us?
So we're a fiscally sponsored organization. So our fiscal sponsor has a 501c3. They handle a lot of administration. So in short, I will write grants, and sometimes if they require a fiscal sponsor, the funding will go to that 501c3, and then we will receive the funding from them. And so it alleviates a lot of the accounting and other admin work that sometimes artists or educators who are starting things find overwhelming as a way to kind of get their business off the ground. And so, yeah, you generally have some type of MOU, some understanding of whose responsibilities are what. For us, what has been a great best practice for us, our fiscal sponsor is another dance organization. It's like our sister company. And so we're a professional dance company. We do performances. Our fiscal sponsor is a youth development organization that trains dancers, right? And so we are aligned, but we're not in competition. When we write grants together, sometimes we write things together, and if it's a performance aspect, we'll do it. If it's like a youth development aspect, she'll do it. So we kind of have that understanding that we can work together. A lot of the dancers she's trained has funneled into our company. So it's kind of great to have a fiscal sponsor that would be in alignment, but you're not necessarily in the same funding pool with them, but they understand the work that you do and can be a resource.
And so I started out as a singer and an educator, and through that, gosh, I do so much. So I started out singing, ended up having my first business was I have Rocke Vocal Studio. So I teach other young people and adults how to sing. In addition to that, I started doing more performing. And so in my performing and going out, that was another business, but I said, let me put that under Rocke Vocal Studio. So Rocke Vocal Studio is singing, my performing, as well as my teaching. Then I started to have to hire, I had to have a pianist to perform with me or a chamber ensemble to perform with me. So then I added that on. So I have subcontractors now. So I started to grow, and then I started HBCU Arts. Before I started HBCU Arts, I became the executive artistic director for Driven Theater Company, which is a 501c3. So instead of starting a new 501c3, I started the program HBCU Arts, and I have it fiscally sponsored under Driven Theater Company. However, HBCU Arts, hopefully in 2027, will become its own 501c3 as I phase out of being the artistic director of Driven Theater Company. And so we actually, Driven Theater Company, we fiscally sponsor another organization, another women's theater company called Lion Women Productions. And so it gets real thick and heavy because I am doing a whole lot, and I teach full-time as well. And so I am coming out of the space of being the artistic director of Driven Theater because I need to focus on HBCU Arts and do more. So I think organically, as an artist, we begin as entrepreneurs and we don't realize it. Like, I didn't realize when I was performing that I was actually an entrepreneur until I had to start dealing with the contracts and and I didn't really like other people managing me. I wanted to manage my own, read my own contracts, figure it out for myself and know how to do the things. And I think, again, we don't realize that we're already entrepreneurs in the essence of our performing. And then when we do, we start to take off in other ways.
The String Project was born out of like a profound appreciation for my own musical upbringing. Before I came to Oakwood, I was a public school music teacher in Miami-Dade County Public Schools for 20 years. Miami is very fortunate to have a lot of magnet programs, arts programs within the public school system. So I worked for a performing arts school where I was the orchestra and choir director. And so it was the norm to see black and brown children playing string instruments, playing band instruments. When I came to Alabama, that was not the case. And so I saw the need for students who are underserved to have at least access. They have access, but they can't afford it. And so String Project is free to anybody who wants to participate. All they have to do is provide their own instruments. But I owe a lot of my musical development to being in an orchestral setting. A lot of people don't know, but I only had 4 years of piano instruction and 4 years of violin instruction. But yet I've been called to do many things with many people, and I owe a lot of that to being in the orchestra setting and being under people who looked like me, pouring into me and ensuring that I got all the opportunities that I needed as a black string player, as a black musician.
Thank you. So as entrepreneurs, as people who start things, right, we have a lot of challenges. And I know that money funding tends to be a challenge, but I want to know, what is a different challenge that you've experienced, that you've overcome, or that you're currently experiencing that you feel comfortable sharing with us? Sarah has.
Yes, I will go first.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I moved to Oakwood, it's a faith-based community. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. It's a Seventh-day Adventist institution. But seemingly because I was an outsider, because I didn't go to Oakwood, everybody that I knew or was in contact with, they were Oakwoodites, but I was not. So initially, I felt like I wasn't accepted at first because I didn't grow up in that community. So they're like, oh, she's giving free lessons. Nobody has to pay for this. What is going on? This seems suspect. And so it took a while to gain the confidence of the community fully. Like, there were people, obviously, from the beginning who supported, but not enough, in my opinion, to get the string project to where it is now. Like, we're in our third year. We're in our third year. Now we have a functioning board, and we're planning big things. And so I would say that the challenge was just kind of gaining the confidence of the community as an outsider, because they didn't know me. They didn't know what I was capable of. And I guess it is warranted, because you don't want some scoundrel coming into your community and ripping off all your kids. So that was my challenge.
I would say my challenge is just like an ongoing one, is just like constant evolution, because there's really not really a way to stop, in a sense. Like, it's not like you might figure out one thing and figure out how to make something work in one way, but you can't sit there forever, or else everyone else will kind of do a similar thing, and then it's like you're not different anymore. So you constantly have to learn how to differentiate yourself, how to change your business to kind of best align with what you need or whatever your goals are. And then you're constantly reevaluating, because goals change over time sometimes, and landscapes change, especially for me on like the internet. Things are just so different than they were like 5-10 years ago. So it's like, okay, like, how do I want to adjust now? So I'd say definitely evolution, but I do think as an entrepreneur, if you really are passionate about it, it helps to kind of like fuel the desire to continue to evolve. So
I would say, as you say, funding is an issue. I think another issue or subconscious obstacle is one's vision. And when I say that, it's really to say that if you don't feel that you see something, then you will subconsciously feel it can't be. And so you have to push past that. It's always interesting when you find innovators, dare I say Elon Musk, dare I say Tesla, these people who, when you learn, Steve Jobs, when you learned about the wheat germ of who they are, there was such an undeniable self-belief that they had that it's almost impossible to believe that that's human, but it is. And I think for me personally, I've seen when I push past the doubt, when I push past the what ifs, when I push past that I don't have the money, it leads to having a question, or leads to asking someone for help, or leads to where you find, oh, that obstacle really was my own stuff.
I would say in dance, one of the challenges that I'm seeing as we talk about like how the landscape has changed over the years is twofold. One, as we grow and scale our organization, being able to keep up with the growth and have it be sustainable. So that is kind of related to funding, but even beyond the funding is also like the human capital, being able to staff and have people interested. But then also, I see an increase in quality dance training, but I'm also seeing less and less of our students interested in concert dance. And so really getting having young people one, have the training, but also have the interest to really sustain a career in concert dance versus pursuing other opportunities or having the desire to kind of break away from a gig mentality and like commit to the infrastructure that's being built. That's kind of one of the challenges I'm seeing in the field. I know that's very dance specific, but I'm curious if other genres are experiencing similar things.
Definitely. I mean,
Okay.
I'm a graduate of the Harlem Boys Choir. You know, I'm a graduate of institution where proper singing was taught and valued and sustained. And so, you know, I think within the last 10 to 15 years, I think art faced a real quote-unquote competitor when you have social media, when you have all of these other devices that are telling you what something is, and then of course when you yourself have studied it or sat under people who studied it, you know the difference. And so you kind of have to, well, you don't have to, but you're kind of faced with the reality of, okay, well, if that works, said person, then you'll see a longevity. You know, so people, I'm a singer, you know, you're a dancer, so it's like, you know, you can dance the way you want, but when you realize that technique or that's not healthy dancing and should something break, then and only then you will realize. But, you know, if you're given the opportunity of proper training and proper structure and things, you would know from the beginning.
And I would say, for me, struggle is staying focused. When you do so many things, when you're passionate about it and you're sharing with other people what your vision is, a lot of times I'll have people say, oh, well, you should try this, and you should try that, and you should try this. Avid is one of those people that says, well, you need to do this and you need to do that. And I said, I need to do what I need to do first. And once I'm successful at that, then I can add some other things on, though I do appreciate hearing that feedback because that does help me to grow and to know what the possibilities are for the future. So trying to stay focused and do what what your purpose to do and do that well, and then take the next step, right? And trying to figure out how to navigate that sometimes is not quite so easy, as well as staying on top of what is new in the game, right? So for me, marketing is a real weakness. And part of that is because I'm so busy as a creative and as a producer of work that I've got to figure out how do I know how to navigate all of the new apps and so I marvel at Kyle when I see his work because I'm like, how did he do all of that? I mean, he's videoing his own clips, he's putting them all together, you're editing them, you're writing the scripts, you're creating the beats, and then you come up with a book, and then you're marketing it, and you got 22 million viewers or some crazy number of viewers. So, figuring out how do I do what I do well, I have an audience, but how do I expand that audience through the marketing? And so, yeah, focus, and how do you stay on top of the new things that are introduced into the field to do well in the industry.
Yeah, Kyle, I wanted to start with you for this next question, and I was wondering if you could enlighten us a little bit. I'm not a content creator, so I don't know, but if you could enlighten us a little bit about how do you do all of those things? And I think we all do a lot of things, but a lot of your audience, from my understanding, is an audience you might never see or have any kind of person-to-person, in-person connection with. And so I'm wondering what that's like, maybe the challenges and opportunities, and if you could share, and if everyone could share, too, how you are leveraging the digital markets, online presence.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of have a saying of anyone can do anything, but if you want to do everything, you need help. So generally speaking, I try to focus really on the creative as much as I can. But I definitely hit a point, especially around 2020, where I was like, okay, I need help if I'm gonna do as many things as I'm currently doing, because short form became really a big thing. And there was a point where long form, you could just make a long form video and that was it, and then wait for the next one. But then people wanted shorts, and I was like, okay, well, how am I gonna do that when I'm also doing this? And then so for me, part of it was kind of just sitting down and coming up with a way to delegate things, and really the easiest way to do that is with systems. So creating a system that you can hand off to somebody else, because it's really easy to have something that you can do, but being able to teach that to somebody else and then make it so that like they could teach that to somebody else, you know, as you scale, is really important. Otherwise, it's really hard to not dilute your product, because then you end up compromising somewhere. And I kind of had a struggle with that when I was like, okay, I'm gonna make music, but I kind of want to make you know, beats too, and I want to work on you know, the book space. And the more time I spent in the book space, the less time I had for like writing. And so it's really it can be a struggle. But for me, really building those systems and then finding very talented people who were able to do, in my case, a lot of jobs. Some people prefer a few people that can do specialized jobs, but I kind of like really talented people that can do a few things, and I can like give them more energy and pass off more to them. That's really what's helped me a lot.
Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, no, I think I'm just curious about how everyone is, to the best of your ability, leveraging sort of the online, the digital space, right? So the way that I found Jolie was actually because she posted about doing the concert tour last year, and so we connected about that. It was I saw an Instagram post. So right, like how is everyone else thinking about growing your brand or your business or your organization online?
So I post a lot of what's going on in the classroom. I also post a lot of personal things, including my youngest child, who went viral on TikTok for singing It's Raining Tacos. But I think, I wish I could create the content that you do, Kyle, I really do. And I just want to say, my kids love you. They're spazzing out right now that I'm sitting on stage with you. We've been watching you for years. But I think for me, what has worked is just the authentic, raw happenings in the classroom or in my house. And because I have my girls play the violin, or I have my students, the orchestra students at Oakwood playing, or the string project students playing, and I get responses from that. And a lot of people have inquired about, you know, how can we join, how can we help you? So for me, it's not about necessarily curating a perfect performance, but just showing the real of what happens in the classroom.
And I've been doing a lot of collaborations this year. And because I know one of my weaknesses is social media, specifically in marketing, I've been doing collaborations with people that are better at it. So that's one of the things I was real transparent with Ciyadh with when we started to talk about what our strength was at HBCU Arts and what Castle of Our Skin's strength was, and we found, I think, a really strong balance. I've collaborated with CAPA, the Coalition for African Americans in the Arts. I'm doing a collaboration with United Negro College Fund's Frederick D. Patterson Research Institute that will be, announced in probably another year or so. Stacey and I collaborated and created a work for a production that we did in Houston in December, and we're going to continue to collaborate to build that project out larger. And so in that way, our resources begin to become shared. So it's not as much as a financial hit on me, and it's as individually, and it's also not as much of a workload hit, right? And so we're able to balance who can do. The key to that, I think, in collaborations, which are always, I think, positive, is being able to really be transparent and say what you do well, what you don't do well, and be willing to learn from one another. And so, yeah.
I would like to add that I think one of the keys to success is to be able to release yourself from things. So like, for example, starting off as an independent choreographer, but transitioning into an artistic director, I just could not do everything. I don't even often choreograph on my company anymore because I'm doing so many other administrative tasks, bringing in guest choreographers, and it's great. It's a great transition, but understanding that. And so what I have done is kind of offloaded the Nia's daughter's social media to an administrative assistant, which she is amazing. She dances in our company, so she's always at the stuff, right? Because she already there. So it's easy. She just come warm up, then she get a little doop, doop, doop backstage. It makes sense, and she understands our mission and our values. So it's kind of worked so far. So I've been really able to offload a lot of the social media because the landscape changes. It starts off with, oh, we're going to do Instagram Reels. That's the way to grow a page. Then it became TikTok. And I never got on the TikTok. I feel like maybe I missed out on that opportunity because I'm like, but how am I going to make sure that the people who see it actually live in the place where we, but the younger dancers in my company would keep trying to encourage me. But then it was like, okay, now the next thing is Substack. So how do you keep up? How do you keep up with the and it's like, okay, now you got to get on LinkedIn. Okay, so all the things, right? But what I do try to do, even with my personal page and the business pages, is create a consistent output to the community. And I want to be very particular in this, not so much, I'm trying to stay away from the word branding, but an authenticity. The warmth that you feel from the page, I want it to be replicated in real life, right? And so even on my personal Instagram, the Black Artsy Mom, I've really thought about how to integrate my life as a family woman, as an arts educator, dance educator, as a leader of an arts organization, to where it feels integrated and it feels personable, that we're creating these high quality productions that are family friendly, right? And so that when people fall in love with the page, they also feel that in real life. And so, as much as digital marketing is important, it's really important that we stay focused on the in-person experiences and what they value. And what I will say, I do not have a large following at all. And sometimes I'll get discouraged because the content I spent a lot of time on, child, don't even do well. I'll be like, I did all of this in this video. But what's interesting is even the content that doesn't do well, when I'm out and about throughout the city of Houston or sometimes people will in person comment on what they liked about something I put out because it's authentic. And even I've been able to get contracts, like I was able to work with the Museum of Fine Arts. They have a Glassell Junior School, it's like a kids arts program, even though my practice is in dance, but because they had seen me put out so much family content, they wanted my children to attend the school and us to make content. And so at the time I had less than 3,000 followers, but they knew that I could put out authentic content that they could reshare and bring in more, I think, students of color ultimately. So I think it's really important to have that authenticity even when you're putting together a digital marketing plan.
Okay, so my next question is one that I really like to ask anyone that I meet, and I think this event that we're doing, our festival, but this panel, right, is a showcase about Black artistry of some kind, whether you identify as a Black artist or you just really have some kind of affinity for Black artists and Black artistry. And so one of my favorite questions is what is my favorite singer's favorite singer? And so what I want to know from you all is, who are your favorite Black artists? Or what's a Black arts experience that you've been to recently that you felt really moved and inspired by?
Catherine Dunham, hands down, is my favorite.
Say more.
Catherine Dunham, so she's considered the matriarch of Black dance. She studied all throughout the Caribbean, Haiti, Cuba, Brazil, but then she also blended it with modern dance. And she toured around the world, really truly elevating Afro-Caribbean cultural dances on a stage in a time when minstrel shows was what we saw as output. And Alvin Ailey, who y'all know is a Texas native, right? He's from a freedom colony in Texas. But his family, just like many Black people during the Great Migration, left Texas and went out west to California. So he ended up moving to California with his mama and went and saw a Dunham show, right? And that's kind of what inspired Alvin Ailey to start in dance. And so it just lets you know the impact that you can make, right? So Catherine Dunham, although she may not be as well known as Alvin Ailey, just to know that Alvin Ailey was inspired by seeing her work on tour to create the probably most well-known modern dance company, minus the Black part, but just probably the most well-known modern dance company in the United States.
Who inspired me? My grandmother inspired me. My grandmother transitioned in 2015. She was 96. She migrated to New York in the 30s. The founder of the Boy Scout of Harlem, Walter J. Turnbull, inspired me also. And colleagues, so many, the list goes really far, but those two persons did something at a time in which one thought that it could never be done, and they did it to the highest of their abilities, just very much similar to, like Stacey said, Ailey as well as Dunham, Misty Copeland, all of these other persons, Debbie Allen. For me, Walter did such a time in the 60s. He created Harlem Boys Choir in Harlem, in the 60s. Like, who would do that, to rise to the top of the annals of a choir in the world. And again, what can I say about my grandmother? I think we all have heroes within our families, the sort of unknown heroes. Mama, like I said, she, her greatest of fame, if you will, she helped burn the mortgage to the church for $97,000 that she raised by just cooking dinners in the church for a year. I'll never forget, it was my sophomore year of high school. Wasn't my greatest time though, yeah. I was not happy, but not happy at all. But I remember that because, again, it taught me sacrifice, it taught me commitment, it taught me dedication, and also very interesting at time as we talk about, as you mentioned, social media. There was a time in which none of this was even around. So how did people get on? How did they compound interest? How did they build a brand such as Ailey again? How did people make it happen? So they did with the tools that they had. Yeah.
I'd say there's a few. So I wish I knew this person's name, but this was an experience that kind of inspired me in North Carolina. It's in the Charlotte Symphony. There was like a conductor that came out, and basically what he did was he made the music for Black Panther. And so the experience was he played Black Panther, but there was no music in it. And so he's there like conducting this whole symphony and doing all the music live for the movie. And it was such a unique experience because you're watching it and it's like, it looks like you're just watching the movie, and then you look down and you're like, oh, all these people are actually playing those, those things. Like if they weren't doing that, it would be just silent. And so that was just really inspirational because you could see how passionate he was and how he'd spent years and years just like learning his craft and, still being so comfortable up there. So that was just really an impressive experience. In terms of specific creators, I would say one is Dave, who's a artist from the UK, and he's a really strong lyricist. And similarly, I can just tell he really honed in on his craft, and despite really hard circumstances that he lived through, was able to build a business behind his art. And a lot of artists kind of deviate a little bit, like not necessarily too much, but like they might be known for making music, and then they start a business in a different respect to kind of like support the overall business. And I just thought it was impressive that he always just focused on writing. So he takes his time with his projects. They're not necessarily long, but when he makes them, they're very masterful and meaningful, and they make more social impacts. So him speaking on topics a lot of artists are like scared to speak on is really inspirational. And so, and then I would say the creatives that I work with on a regular basis. So like in terms of, there's an animator I work with, and he's like the main person I work with, but his dedication to the craft just constantly pushes me to like do better myself, because he'll be making some of the animated videos for some of the songs I'm writing, and I see his videos and I'm like, oh, I gotta get my pen game up because I gotta keep up with that. So yeah, it's just really, yeah, a combination of people I've seen and some of the people I work with.
I'm gonna start with my students and young people. I am a musician. However, I'm also a textile artist. So we have like Edjanetta Miller, who created the quilt that's up there. Phenomenal. That's her first digital, her first work using digital art. She's based in Hartford, Connecticut, but she has work at the Smithsonian and all across the world. Then there's so many visual artists. In Houston, a friend, Early Hudnall Jr., phenomenal photographer that focuses on African American pictures in black and white from the Third Ward area primarily, but he branches out as well. And I've been trying to acquire one of his pieces for a long time. I'm working on it. I'm working on him. And then Marian Anderson. I wrote my dissertation about Marian Anderson because I also have a strong affinity for artists who connect humanitarianism with their art. And Marian Anderson, a lot of people don't know many things about her. And so when I went to do my research and sat in 200 boxes of Marian Anderson's archives and saw how much money she was making in 1928 and what she was putting in her bank deposits in 1924, and how she worked with the United States government on psychological warfare, and toured in 6 continents. There are only 7. I just marvel at what she did in her time for an African American woman, the first woman to tour Scandinavia. The first American, let me get that right, first American to tour Scandinavia ever, right? And then we talk about firsts or onlys, and we're realizing now, because we have the internet, that was not necessarily so. It's just those are the first, are the ones we heard about first, right? And so the John William Blind Boone, he's a pianist out of, I could go on and on and on. I love the history of African Americans in the arts, in music. Valerie Coleman with the HDAP program she went to Hampton University. And we don't talk about how many of the Black artists and other artists, right, that have come out of HBCU traditions have excelled in the industry, but we don't talk about the fact that they came from the HBCU, right? And I think that hurts the HBCU. Kyle, we need to know you went to Howard. We need to know you went to Central, right? We need to know you work at Oakwood. We need to know how we're going back and reaching back into our institutions to inspire the next generation. But then when you go into those institutions and you see what those kids are doing, oh my goodness, they're doing some incredible things, and I'm learning from them, I think, more than they're learning from me in some ways. And so I'm gonna end on that.
Well, I was hoping by the time it was my time to talk that I would have been able to narrow it down. But there have been so many influences. I think I'd like to attribute most of my inspiration to my family and friends. They truly have this out-of-world belief in what I can do. Sometimes I'm just like, are you sure? Somebody will call me to do something. I'm like, did you dial the right number when you were thinking about this request? So people believing in me that much kind of gives me the inspiration to rise to the occasion. Musically, there's so many. I was raised in church. I'm still very heavily involved in church, but I would say Take 6, my ultimate favorite group of all time. And my best friend, who passed away in 2020, he was the most phenomenal pianist that I've ever come across. And so he was very inspirational. My husband, he's also a musician. And one thing that I've learned from him, he does everything by himself. It's not always a good thing, but what I've seen him do is persevere through rejection. And so when somebody says, oh no, I can't do it, he's like, okay, don't worry about it, I got it. And he's a masterful engineer, writer, singer, he does all these things, so that's very inspirational to me as well. And then like Jolie said, your students, I always used to tell them, I'm as good as I am because of you guys. My students have sung at Carnegie Hall, we've gone to state assessment, gotten straight superiors. I'm like, this wouldn't be possible if you didn't trust me enough to follow my direction, and for that I'm very grateful and appreciative. But I wouldn't be the educator I am if you didn't believe that I could take you to a certain place. And so those are my inspirations.
Thank you. So we have a few more minutes left, and it wouldn't be a panel if we didn't ask you if you had questions for this group. So Kelly, could you help with the microphone running? Kelly is Castle of Our Skins' marketing manager. Woo, thank you. The markets are marketing.
Great. I'd like to know about impact. What's been your impact? What have been unintended consequences of your presence in the artist space?
I appreciate that question. That's a very good question. So how can I answer this nicely? Okay. I've learned personally as an educator that when you are about the children that you serve, you unintentionally expose those that are not there for the children. And as an artist and a teacher and an educator, you are then given the choice to either stand for what you believe or fall for what you're afraid of, right? And so I appreciate you asking that question, because as entrepreneurs, as artists, you're constantly reminded as to what is your why. And why is your why a why, right? Another unintentional, if you will, impactful action is who, in fact, you inspire. So again, as my colleagues have shared, I've had students to go on to have careers, to go on to have Broadway careers, things of that nature, not knowing that they're impacted. Now, when you realize that they were not in your program, but they were in your school, and so they saw what you did with the choir, but they were like an fine arts major, but all of that feeds into your why.
Like to piggyback on what Avid said. I would hope that hearing everybody talk up here, you realize that we didn't get into what we're doing because we wanted fame and fortune. Now that might be an outcome for some, but for the rest of us, we're doing it because we love it. One very distinct experience that I remember is I have a student, she's now a student at the University of Miami, which is my alma mater. I got her in 6th grade. So the school that I taught at before coming to Oakwood was a 6 through 12 magnet school. So I had my students for 6 years. It was phenomenal because, you see awesome growth. During, right after we got back to school after the pandemic, we had to have all sorts of weird setups, and kids had to be seated 6 feet from each other, and it was just weird. But this child, I said, Harmony, her name's Harmony Warren, phenomenal cellist. I said, you're gonna direct the class today. So she's directing, and she says, Miss Ruff, you have the best job in the world. She says, you literally take us from nothing to something. And when I'm getting goosebumps right now. When I tell you that nothing else really can put a light to anything else we do, because now she got a full ride to University of Miami. University of Miami is $96,000 a year, okay? She got a full ride, and she's studying music education, and she told me it's because of me. And I'm like, nothing else matters after that. Every little thing that we try to do is really just about reaching one person who may turn away from what they were doing and onto the path that you can help them sojourn, if that makes sense.
I am a strong woman of faith. And many years ago, I realized, I'll go further back. When I first started singing, I was 3 when I started singing. And my grandfather was crying when I sang Ave Maria to him for the first time. And I said, Grandpa, why are you crying? I sing because I'm happy. I know that sound. I didn't even know the hymn at that time. But I said, I sing because I want to make other people happy, not because I want you to cry and be sad. He says, oh, I'm not sad. You'll understand when you get older. But when I got older, I was singing at a wedding, and people started literally passing tissues back in the pews. And they're crying. I thought I was singing a joyous song. So through those experiences, it took me a long time to come back to performing because I didn't understand that. I realized that I'm a vessel of God, that it's nothing that I could do myself that could impact how you feel as a human being or know what you're going through in your life, in your condition, in your circumstance. But as I stand up on that stage and perform, as I sit in that classroom and I teach, as I talk with colleagues, right, invite them to make art with me, I know that every step of my life, every path, every every place that I go, God has me there for a reason. I may not understand that. I may not know how it's going to impact other people, but I know that I'm there for a reason. And later on, I get that confirmation when I hear, oh, I was coming out of the emergency room, out of the recovery room, and I woke up hearing you sing. I wasn't there in the room with them. Sharon was with me in the ICU, and one of our church members, who was a mother of the church, was in a coma and died a week later. She was supposed to be brain dead, and I started singing Great Is Thy Faithfulness through the respirator in her mouth. She started to sing the words to Great Is Thy Faithfulness with me. And you wouldn't believe it, Sharon was sitting in the room with me. My cousin was brain dead. They had just taken her off the respirator. I'm singing, and tears started rolling down her eyes. She was supposed to be brain dead. That is not something that I can do. It's beyond me. That's the power of God, the power of the universe, and what was here before. So as long as I do my job and what I was called to do, and I know how to listen to that, that's all that matters. And those other folks that are impacted because I allow God to work through me. And I'm grateful to be in a position to say God uses me. And I think we all are in that. And I don't always think that everybody realizes that. And so, it's a powerful thing, and I'm just happy to be able to do that.
I wanted to share as well. The first time I heard Dr. Rocke sing at a dress rehearsal, I too cried. It was a cerebral experience. It wasn't even a real run. It was just the tech in a dress rehearsal. So absolutely, your voice is a gift. So we have a show in my company called the Fairy Tale Project, and in short, it's about a Texas freedom colony, which are places where Black people started their own towns post-emancipation. And this is this is the real story of it. My husband and my children are descendants of Jim and Winnie. And so Jim was enslaved on a plantation in Mississippi, and his wife Winnie was sold to East Texas. He foraged through the forest, crossed the Mississippi River, and they reunited at a spring in Newton County. Fast forward Juneteenth, many, many years later, they purchased the land and started their own freedom colony. So I wanted to create historical fiction. It's fiction. It's a lot of Afrofuturism in it. Production about this beautiful love story, which is why it's entitled The Fairy Tale Project. And so I've been able to work with the Texas Freedom Colonies Project, which is the brainchild of Dr. Andrea Roberts, who studied and has found over 557 Black settlements in Texas that were started from 1865 to 1930, right? So there's a really heavy, important piece of research, but I've been able to make an artistic production about it. So two very tangible pieces of impact is, one, I've been able to work, okay, I love living in Houston, but Texas is a lot. If y'all keep up with the news, it's a lot. Texas ain't it, but Houston is great. Yeah, so we got a lot going on in the education system, but I've been able to work with some policyholders, some of the more progressive members of State Board of Education, to try to introduce Texas essential knowledge and skills. So those are like the curriculum standards about freedom colonies into the curriculum. Of course, the not so good guys didn't approve it, but at least it's on record, so that if we are ever able to get on the other side of history, those TEKs have been written and they can be implemented. So it's not a 1,000% win, but when I think about impact, we're already starting the process for that. But also, what's more dear to my heart is we've been able to tour this production specifically to small towns in Texas. We know Texas is the home of the most Black people, around 4 million Black people. 1.5-ish million live in the Houston area, then another 1.5-ish million live in like the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but then the other 1 million live in East Texas. And so we've been able to tour small towns in rural Texas. The biggest piece of impact is when people see the show and then I see them later, whether they saw the show in the Houston area or somewhere else. This just happened to me a couple of weeks ago, and then they tell me that they went and checked on their family property. because so many black people have lost land in Texas specifically, but really all throughout the South. And so seeing the show inspire something in them to get their property out of heirs property, or just to go check on or work on a will. Someone just told me, yeah, I went to Seguin, which is like I think near the San Antonio area, and just started the process to see what their family land and property is. And that has to be, or people have told me they decided to reunite, like reinvigorate their family reunion. A lot of us stopped doing family reunions during the pandemic, and as you know, it's always kind of hard to get something back off the ground. And so people have told me after seeing the show, they brought back their family reunions. Things like that are the biggest impact, because for many intents and purposes, like, this is just a show and it's beautiful and they fall in love and the grandkids travel time, but it's so much more than that. And to have that level of impact of people getting a business together and seeing small incremental pieces of legislation passed is a beautiful thing.
So I guess in at least my line of work, which is more like content creation and making videos online, what I tend to notice is that you become often like a symbol of what's possible when you create. And I think that's across like other industries too, for sure. But a lot of the time, people don't do things because they don't even know if it's possible. And so when they see you do it, a lot of the time they'll be inspired to do it themselves. So the amount of content creators I've seen and like been to conventions, because my day-to-day is usually like writing and just kind of like working on new stuff and the back end side of things. But when I do go out, the amount of times that people tell me that I inspired them to make content themselves, and like, I mean, it's been incredible. And not like you don't think people care, but like you forget sometimes that like the number of views, like a lot of people think, oh, 2,000 views, it's not very good. But like that's 2,000 people. Like if there were 2,000 people in here, it would be packed out. So it's just like, it's a lot of people that are tuning in a lot of the time. And often people care more than it sometimes feels like they do. And so it's really cool seeing like other people pursuing their dreams and passions, and they tell you like, oh, it's because of you, or like you really drove me to do it, or even just the impact that you had in their lives, like being them watching your content and how much that meant to them and how it's a light and during a darker time for them. So, yeah.
Is it on? Oh, I think we might have time for one more question if anyone has one. And you can always ask us later. We are around for the next several days, most of us at least. So, okay, you'll get to us later. That's totally great. I love that. I love that. So again, thank you all for coming. This is the first event in a series of events that we are having throughout the entire week. There will be an event directly after this, and then 3, and then we are having our concert later this evening at 6:30. Talk at 6, yes, featuring Ken Jackson, who will talk about his artwork, which is over here. So you will see that here, and the work of John Biggers.
And the Texas Southern University Museum.
What she said, the Texas Southern University Museum. And then we'll have our concert at 6:30, which features works by living composers from the Blacknificent 7, and a new work by their mentee, Jalen Vinson, who I think, is right there. So you'll get to hear his piece later tonight. So if you have questions, please come up to us, let us know. Thank you all for coming. We will be around all week.
And I'm going to add one more thing. So we have other events happening on Monday, 4 to 6. And they're all at West Tisbury Inn, and you can hop on the bus. It stops right in front of West Tisbury Inn, or take your taxi or drive out. We have parking available, but we'll be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We have events going on, so please feel free to visit our website, www.hbcu-arts.org/fest. All of the information is on your fan. Grab a fan before you leave so you can stay cool. Thank you.